Okay, looks like I got everybody in from the waiting room who was there currently. As usual, if you see me looking away, I'm just getting somebody else in as they've joined the meeting. But I'd like to welcome everyone to the YIC webinar session 17. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Our agenda, as usual, will be the welcome and mindfulness from me, an introduction of presenters, and then we'll hear from Nguyen on restorative practices. And then Scott Eyre will wrap us up talking about creating cultures of staff wellness and care for our schools and community partners. All right. There we go. Okay. So this morning, I just have a quick video to show us on a different mindfulness technique that is the 5-finger breathing. Let me figure out which screen that's on. There we go. One more from the waiting room. All right. Okay, so as usual, hopefully videos play nicely for everybody, but Wi-Fi is what Wi-Fi is. So if the words in the mouth don't match, I would just encourage you to close your eyes and listen.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sabrina Stutz, and I'm a pediatric psychologist at Chalk Children's Hospital. Today, I'm going to teach you a strategy for breathing for stress reduction called 5-finger breathing. Sometimes it can be helpful to have a visual while we're trying to breathe to calm ourselves down. So what I'm going to ask you to do is put your hand out in front of you, like you're about to give a really awesome high five, and take your pointer finger, place it on the outside of your thumb, and when we trace up a finger, we're going to inhale, and when we trace down a finger, we're going to exhale. Remember to use our belly breathing, so soften your belly, shrug your shoulders a little bit, get them loosened up, and we can begin. So we're going to inhale as we trace up, and exhale as we trace down. Inhale as we trace up, and exhale as we trace down. And if your mind is starting to wander, inhale. You can bring it back to the site of your hand and the feeling of your fingers as you inhale as you move up, and exhale as you come down. Inhale up, and exhale down. This can be a fun strategy for kids who are having a tough time, but it can also be a good activity to do before bedtime to keep kids calm and help them learn to breathe in a calm way so that they can use it when they're feeling stressed out later.
So I thought that was just a nice short video, and I'm sure, like our children, we're all still dealing with the stress of lives these days. So I thought adding our mindfulness back in would be good for all of us. All right, one more from the waiting room. There we go. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I didn't realize that slide was still in there. Excuse me. Okay, I would like to introduce Nguyen. Cuong is currently working as a prevention specialist at my office, the Utah State Board of Education. His primary focus is on restorative practices under the student support section. In addition, he works with the dropout prevention and absenteeism/truancy and manages the annual Do the Right Thing Challenge, a youth violence prevention initiative for 7th and 8th grade students. And it's an essay contest that I've learned about. It's pretty cool that we'll be sharing some information on. Prior to coming to USBE, Nguyen had 12 years of work experience focused on juvenile justice policy for the Utah Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice for the Governor's Office. For the first 7 years, he worked with various juvenile justice stakeholders to develop and implement a plan to reduce the overrepresentation of minority youth in juvenile justice systems. The last 5 years, he was the director for the Utah Board of Juvenile Justice that managed the Title II federal grant and, to ensure Utah complies to provide core standards of protection for youth when encountered in the juvenile justice system. In addition, Nguyen was the director of the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee, which is a 24-member committee tasked with overseeing the implementation of House Bill 239, which was an overhaul of the juvenile justice reform. On a volunteering capacity, Nguyen is the program director for a nonprofit volunteering organization outside of his regular job. And after Nguyen, we will be hearing from Scott. Let me find my mouse. There we go. So Scott also works with the State Board of Education, but he is a liaison with the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. But at the state board, he's a school-based mental health educational specialist. And like I said, he acts as a liaison between our office and the Division of Substance Abuse. He's part of the School Safety Center leadership team, which works to identify evidence-based approaches that increase the physical and psychological safety of students and improve overall school climate. Scott has a passion for working with youth and spent the first decade of his career at the Provo Canyon School, where he helped to develop the early adolescent and elementary programs there. In 2016, he began his employment with the state of Utah, where he spent 3 years with the Juvenile Justice Services before transferring to his current position. Scott holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from UVU and a master's in social work from University of Utah. And in his free time, he enjoys all things outdoors, coaching his son's sports teams, building and testing paddle boards, and running and surviving the occasional ultra marathon in the desert. All right. So with that, let me stop my share so that Cuong can share his presentation. All right.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you today. Just gonna make sure that I click all the necessary button to make sure things are working. 1 second.
Sure.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yep, that's the PowerPoint. You're good to go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. It's pretty warm, and then looking back, wow, it's been 12 years working at the governor's office, and then it's already been almost 2 years here at USBE. Just a little historic perspective when I was doing the implementation on juvenile justice policy. Part of that's like to address various part of the provision in that bill was to keep low-level offenses and Class C infractions and truancy kind of stuff at the school level, and to address that using MCOT, which is the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team, using Youth Court, other programs that local education agency develop, including restorative justice or restorative practice. And hence there's the work on that realm where I really passionate about seeing the work at the ground level and implementation. And hence the opportunity came at USBE to work with and work for restorative practice realm. And so I have that kind of connection, and I'm glad to be in this realm, if you will. Today's restorative justice, restorative practice, I will share the full spectrum of that, and then the overview of that, and then we'll dive down and dive down in part of that spectrum in terms of restorative practice. Today's work, this full training, which you won't get today, you just get part of today's training. But if you know the full training, then you have a fundamental increased knowledge of principle of restorative practice, awareness of discipline window, understand of the continuum of restorative practice, and increase restorative practice and everyday interaction with youth wherever you are, maybe at school, maybe in at other settings that when you encounter as a mentor. Due to time, we will focus on just item 1 today, but as time go on, and if there's other opportunities, I would love to come back and share with you on this realm, on item 2, 3, and 4. But before we do that, instead of me talking, I have, it is a bit long, a 15-minute video, but it is give you a full spectrum overview of what restorative practice is. And then we'll come back and dive down on the first section of that would be the building relationship. So with that, I will hit this play, and Amanda, if you will give me a thumbs up if it's working. Okay.
Restorative Practices has really change the school environment.
There is a calmness and a consideration that's coming out that wasn't there before.
And you can say exactly what you've been needing to say.
I think the kids are really, really responding to it.
It helps me think about what other people really like about the world.
Well, what I like about circles is like everybody gets a turn.
We need to talk to our kids. We need to create these relationships.
It's all about building relationships.
They're able to believe in their own feelings and to share their own feelings.
You get to say everything you want to say, and people listen to you.
It truly is something that's allowing our students to believe that they feel safe and to believe that they feel cared about within our community.
It made me feel like a part of this class. It made me feel special.
I think it's really transformed our school. We're working towards building the kind of school that we want.
Restorative practices are based on principles that emphasize the importance of positive relationships as central to building community and involve processes that restore relationships when harm has occurred. A restorative school environment is about building relationships, giving students a voice, creating an inclusive community, working with students, and consistency in the restorative process.
It's all about building relationships and stressing the importance of that, to know that if I just spend time building relationships with my students, that's going to allow for a climate in the classroom that will really foster their learning.
Before we can get to testing, before we can get to academics, we have to start with how do we connect to and how do we relate to this human being that is in front of us. Restorative Practices has been able to give people language around taking all of those different things on. The number one thing for me being the relationships that people have with one another.
Human beings are happier, more productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them.
We often, as adults, we talk down to the kid. It can be something as simple as, you threw that pen at him, I need you to come in at lunch, I need you to serve it detention.
In a lot of areas in their lives, they don't feel like they get to be heard, they're talked to.
Letting the kid talk. I think that's the biggest thing.
A lot of adults that only let you say what they want to hear.
The key to the whole system, restorative practice to me, is trust. They have to trust that you're going to allow them to speak.
Someone's actually listening to what I have to say, why I'm hurting. They're listening and they're not judging me. It's a great feeling.
To allow everybody's stories to be a part of the community. And we're building that framework.
It really just builds community, and it just creates a model for how we all want to relate to one another.
Ultimately, everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging. They want to be seen. They want to connect with another person.
Children who are assailants are often victims themselves who haven't been taught that they really are part of something. They don't feel like they're part of something, and they don't feel that they have a voice.
No matter who you are here at Civic Center, this is a community, and we work really hard to instill community and to help people feel like there's a place where they're wanted, where they feel comfortable, they feel good about coming to school every day.
When I first came into school, I think that I felt like a fish out of water, but when I started participating more, I got to see how everybody interacts, and everybody was just fine about it.
What I really like about the restorative practices is that you're working with the students to help them to develop their own problem-solving skills.
You have to make this sort of leap of faith that it's going to work out and give them full buy-in to the culture of the school. It really makes sense because they're the ones who have to go to school here.
They work it out. You resolve it. You tell me what you think you should do to make that person feel better. They come up with some things that are phenomenal.
It's always going to be the same process. For the adults, we have a tool that gives us the words to say and a process to go through for every single case. kids who have a lot of trauma in their lives. This is the same process every day with every adult, and no matter what happens, they are being heard.
Using these questions, and not everyone has them memorized yet, but even when they take out the card, it's giving them a chance to pause before reacting. It's giving the adult a chance to pause before reacting and the child a chance to pause, and so it sort of slows down that process of reactivity.
The continuum of restorative practices includes effective statements, restorative dialogue and impromptu conferences, circles, community building and repairing harm, and formal conferencing. Effective statements are statements that include how a person was affected by the behavior of another person.
Teachers are really trained now in like using effective statements. So as opposed to saying stop talking, it's you're frustrating me right now because I'm trying to talk to the class and you keep talking. It'd be helpful if you stopped.
You're gonna come in quietly, you're gonna have a seat, and you're gonna give me your attention. Watch how Kino does it so beautifully. I love how the class is giving her plenty of thinking time. A variety of sports, I like it. Everybody's thinking for themselves, their own ideas. I like how he knows he shouldn't be playing in his folder right now.
I can use an affective statement and I can say, I really care about you right now and I'm concerned about the fact that you haven't been to school for 3 days. Is everything okay with you and your family right now? Because last week you were here every day and I know that your mom has been sick.
When responding to a conflict, a restorative approach consists of asking key questions.
We usually follow those specific questions. It's more or less what happened, what were you thinking, what are you thinking about now, who have you harmed, how can we resolve it?
Instead of saying, why did you do that? Asking, what happened? Creating a deeper understanding of the importance of letting the kids express themselves.
Everybody's using this same terminology, and the kids, in my opinion, are getting that.
It's become a way that we talk at home. You know, instead of saying you need to apologize to your sister, we say to both kids, how are you going to make this right?
They know that this is a place where they will be treated fairly. And I think that's so important for kids to understand and know.
A restorative circle is a community process with a range of purpose, including community building and repairing harm.
We do circles all the time. We have advisories every day, which is like a half-hour small group of kids. And that's always a circle. We do circles as a staff every time we meet.
We do circle every morning. It's a way for me to touch bases with my kids every day. It's also another way for the kids to feel like they are spoken and they're heard. And it's, you know, it's raw. It's their true feelings. And a lot of it has actually come with the restorative practices. Rather than just saying I'm sad, they're able to explain why they're sad now.
That made me feel proud.
It was accidents. When I go out to recess, I play soccer and I feel strong.
How did it make you feel?
Smart.
They know that when they're willing to express themselves, other people will be receptive to what they have to say.
Circles can be used for conflict resolution, building community, healing, problem solving, brainstorming, diffusing tension, reflecting, family issues, introducing new students, farewell to students leaving, and community violence debriefing. A restorative conference is a structured meeting with the victim, offender, and affected parties to decide as a group how the harm will be repaired by the offender.
We go to the parties, usually the students, and they both agree to it. And it's a chance for them to talk things out, to hear each other's perspectives. So we go through the questions here. The questions for the person being harmed and the person for the questions for the person who did the harm. And usually how it works is both sides have done some harm and both sides feel harmed. And so we just go through the questions and they each get to tell their perspectives on it, and then they come up with the solution. So it's problem solving, it's real life skills for them, and they generally feel better about it in the end, and they feel like it's more fair.
Tell her what you're gonna do.
Well, Raven, if we're gonna be friends, then we can't be fighting or nothing. We can't let what people say come between us. Because most of the stuff that people say is not true. They try to start fights.
It's a pretty radical shift in a way, even though it felt subtle at first. I think it's pretty radical.
You have a paradigm shift from before, like when somebody broke a rule, then they would be punished for the breaking of the rule. A restorative approach is teaching the person who's caused the harm to look at how their actions impact not just the person that they're hurting, but also the people around them. Then a lot more learning and accountability can happen.
Recognizing that there are people that were affected by that choice, and the effect might be something as simple as my feelings were hurt, or the effect might be so strong that another child doesn't want to go to school the next day.
What I found with restorative practices, not only does it allow a chance to build relationships, but more importantly, it creates accountability.
Restorative practices to me is taking the time to sit down and find out what is really going on, because that's the only way you're going to prevent it from happening again.
You get down to what's really going on. Lower the repeat of incidences that come up because those underlying issues are not getting addressed.
Instead of getting a referral because someone's talking back to the teacher in class, I get a referral for the reasons why the child may be talking back in class. So the student didn't get any food, the student lost their housing, the parents are separating. So we're getting at those underlying reasons, and then I can actually do the job that I was put here to do versus putting out fires.
I do our suspension stats for our school every year, and for the past 7 years I've created charts after every semester, after every school year. The discipline model, although for some cases I think is necessary, maybe mandatory, that it doesn't fit anymore. What I realize is that we can't expel or discipline ourselves out of the problem. It's going to take real action from us as teachers and administrators and just concerned citizens to change that cycle.
The old model was very punitive. I think we just kind of took in our mind that this person's guilty, you get a punishment and go on, and that was some vindication for the victim. In this situation, there's also vindication for the victim by hearing that the person can actually acknowledge what they did, speak about what they were thinking at the time, and also that perpetrator can hear how it made that victim feel.
The net effect has been amazing. The office used to be full of kids. We didn't have enough seats for all the kids in the office. Kids would run into the office trying to tell their stories, yelling because they wanted to be the first one to tell their version of whatever it was that happened. Now they walk in.
I just hear so much less yelling by kids, by adults, by all the staff members, by family members.
It's really important for a child's future and for their adulthood to be able to resolve conflict appropriately as a kid. And they're learning to do that at school.
And there's a feeling of calmness that we didn't have before. There's a feeling of knowing that whatever happened is going to be taken care of, that everybody's story will be heard. It allows them to handle the smaller things in a faster, more effective way, and then the more serious things get to have a little bit more attention.
It really works. It's something I've been doing for a long time, but I think with the new terminology and everybody pitching it, it's helpful, very helpful.
The guiding team folks have agreed especially. I think we need to get to the next level, really to have staff members practicing what we've implemented, like giving each other those effective statements, feeling like it's a safe place to come to one another with any kinds of differences or problems that we can work out through this restorative model.
Restorative practices helps kids recognize that these feelings that they have as a result of something can be changed, and everybody can move forward. The kid who did the harm, the kid who was harmed, the teacher who might have been harmed in this process, the whole school community. I think it's really the way to go.
It's allowing our students to take control over how their days run. That no one's going to tell them what to do. You have control over how you interact with your friends and your teachers and anyone else in the school.
But most people really believe that education is the way our world is going to get better, and on the idea that everyone deserves the chance to be heard. Restorative practices really embodies what most teachers went into teaching to accomplish in the first place. They wanted to be part of a community of relationship that provides education. We need to reclaim the idea of relationship in education.
It works here. It's a great model here that we're using at Civic Center, and it's working for us. So I would imagine that it could work for any school if it can work here.
It's been great for our school.
I see it working.
All right. Thoughts? I want to take a couple of minutes just to share maybe what is your overall reactions to the video.
I'll jump right in. You know, since we're in the relationship business, this really spoke to me. I know that mentors can't necessarily implement what's done in schools, but like, I'm wondering if in some situations they could do circles with teachers and other adults in their lives to still help youth that they're working with.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda.
You know, in our line of work, working with the youth in care, they're used to being yelled at. They're used to being told they're doing something wrong. They're used to being told, you know, this is a punishment for you. And it's something that they just became numb to. And so we went over this with you before with North St. Pete School District, Cuong, and we saw this video and we actually had a meeting about it. And we've done a lot of training with the rehabilitation home staff too, and have noticed a big difference the last few years when we've been, you know, pulling kids out. We're calm with them. We talk to them. We let them get it out. And one of the things that I've done is I start taking kids on walks around the school when they get really antsed up, and instead of them fighting, they're able to just express their feelings. They're able to say whatever they want, no repercussions. And when we listen, it does show big, you know, support for them, but they do calm down much faster. They do feel that support. And so I really like how moving from one thing of what they're being used to of being yelled at to, hey, I'm here, let me listen to you. I totally understand you. It does make a huge difference in how the rest of their day goes and their behavior in the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Right, a lot of time it's like nobody listened to me, right? So if we have the chance for the youth to speak and express their emotion, their thinking, their emotions, and then that's give us an angle of how to work with students. And that's part of the mentions, right? That they've been looked at, they've been talked down. So let's give them a chance so that we can work with them. Yeah, maybe one more, couple more.
I think adding to that conversation about just letting each student kind of tell their perspective and their story and say the things that they need to say. And then the question that stood out to me in that whole video was that mom who said, okay, what are you going to do to make it right? Or what needs to happen now? And putting that on the youth and letting them come up with those solutions, I think is really great. First, I get to speak and now I get to do something about it. So I really liked that.
Thanks, Julia. All right. In the interest of time, so that was just an introduction. And if you can see the whole spectrum of restorative practice from the beginning to recognizing youth behavior, talking about relationship, and then as we move on to address students' behavior in very specific way, including effective statement, using a small importune conversation, applying the circle there, and then the formal conferencing is part of the continuum, but that is more of kind of a last resort because harm's already been done and to address that. So it takes more time to address and facilitate that conversation. But for now, so hopefully what you get out of the video is just what being shared here, and it is a full spectrum, the continuum of restorative practice. At this moment, we will go is to dive down, and the first part of that is look at the relationship part and building and have a conversation about building relationship. If we implement a restorative practice correctly, school-wide or at your setting. If you could transform your school climate or at the YIC setting into a building that into building relationships so that teacher, school administrator, and staff spend less time in discipline referral, would you do that? Would you want to spend time on one of the teachers said like to do the job that you actually being hired to do, which is teaching our youth and working with our youth? Would you do that? Our claim is that the restorative practice help you free up those time to disciplining, to address disciplinary issue and then focus on teaching and working with the youth. So in terms of the guiding principle for restorative practice, it's not per se, if you will, a program, right? And the work here is to, on a mind shift of thinking and practicing from building, building healthy relationship and preparing harm. Looking to the different lens of managing student behavior rather than punishment. So teaching them skill on how to manage those behavior. Rather than detention, suspension, expulsion, it's about building relationship as the core principle of restorative practice. Give more time to your day, right? When you apply restorative practice, we believe it will be significantly reduced amount of time spent on reporting and referring to principal office or school administrator who are addressing disciplinary issue and focus on the content at hand, which is teaching. So it's not per se a program, but it's more about mind shift practice every day, asking the right question, asking the question to encourage youth to think about their behavior rather than calling them out. This is maximizing the time that you are with when you are mentoring student. This is where you have the time, right? How can we maximizing what is the word? Building that relationship to maximize best benefit the time that you are with the youth rather than talking about, oh, this is what you did wrong and all of that. So and we tend to have that negative mindset where we can come up with a tons of lists of negative behavior and then say, so what's the one positive things that I did? Then it takes time to think about it. So we need to shift thinking, what did the youth do right? So we can build that confidence for our youth. And it's about building that culture within the classroom or the setting that you're with. Just take a few minutes. What are school about today? Any question, and it's open mic, so just share your thoughts on.
Can you give me an example about that? Like, what are you looking for with that question? What are schools about today?
What is school about today? Are we teaching academic? Are we teaching? Or are we managing students' behavior? I don't know. How does it look like for us today in the process? And I think the spectrum. Let me pull this out. Is that we just want to look at the framework on how school was until how school today, and then just checking in with folks on what are some of the barriers that you or the challenges that you are dealing with as you work with the youth within the setting that you are.
Well, one of the ones that we're currently dealing with, after ripping the bathrooms off the wall and destroying the sinks and the toilets, now with the TikTok challenge, they are assaulting the teachers and they're physically slapping them and hitting them and filming it and putting it online because that's cool.
I was quickly going to say that it seems like schools are not only teaching academics, but we're also working on social emotional learning for our students and helping them to understand how to be good community members and more than just academics, which is all very important, but hard to fit in a short day.
Well, and from my perspective, that we're actually talking about the whole student. It used to just be all education and that was the focus and you had to fit in the little boxes. And now we've started to figure out kids don't fit in boxes and they might need their own individualized, supports or programs or whatever to help them be successful.
It's kind of odd to share this. I had a group of little girls in my house yesterday, and one of them talked about a little boy at school who was constantly beating all the other kids up. And the kids are telling me that they know of drug use in their family, and this boy's using drugs. And my question was, well, what are they doing to help this boy understand how he's affecting the other kids? Are the other kids talking to him and saying, hey, wait, back off? Let's talk about why you're so angry. And so I like this restorative practices idea. I don't know how their school is implementing it or if they even are. Somebody needs to talk to the kids, and the children see that. And I don't think they saw that they had any influence on this boy. I feel like they need to feel like they had some power over what was happening and should have been able to say, let's figure out why you're so angry.
Any last comment on this?
I think a lot about the old adage of teach a man to fish, and it feels to me like so often we just expect kids to know how to handle conflict and to know how to interact with people and those things, but nobody is teaching them the way that it used to be, that those things were established in the home and that they were important in the community. And so I think school definitely has swayed a great deal in those social skills and in trying to help them understand just how to interact with human beings and to be good citizens. And if we don't do that, then I think we're headed for some really scary times with people not understanding how those things work. And so I think a lot about, we can just do it for them, or we can intervene and we can take control, or we can teach them how to monitor themselves and how to interact with the people around them. And I mean all of the things from bullying and, being in control, and to help empower them to realize that they are in control of themselves and they get to make the choices about their lives. And then we wrap those tools around so they know how to fish, in essence.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing. I think so there's a school perspective in terms of teaching our youth changes, the mindset and how it was to how it is now, and then all the challenge we do. I just want to, and I don't have all the solution, but what I want to change is it helped now and then that to step back and look at the long view, right? That we can't do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in that we can't just do that. But what we can do something, and we need to do it well. So that's why in this spectrum, right, that what you are doing is to plant a seed that one day will grow. And then as a teacher, and you already know this, as a mentor, some of the work that you're doing has an impact. It may not be now, and the seed that you plant now, you may not see is fruitful, but know that you are doing the better things for our youth. That we are providing the youth is the way it's saying here, that the produce effect that beyond the capabilities that we think of, right? So you're planting the seed, you're helping our youth in that spectrum when they are with you at the setting that you're at. And so within that spectrum, the restorative practice is talking about building that relationship. So research has, for you to easy to remember, is RCA, relationship, community, and accountability. So relationship research has shown that building a strong relationship improves student learning. We need good connection by creating relationship. So in recognizing that the first step in building relationship is actually you have to create it, and that you'd have to develop that relationship with whoever that you're working with, right? You maintain and sustain that relationship, and at time you actually have to prepare that relationship due to very recent conflict, and through that process is where you build stronger relationship. I would challenge you, how do you think about relationship? What are relationships we're talking about? Between the student to student relationship within the classroom or within the setting that you have? What about the teacher, student to teacher, or in your case, and most of you are, is that student to the mentor relationship, right? What about mentor to mentor? What about the mentor to the building administrator? What about the mentor to the parents, right? Talking about relationship between students within the school, how they are interacting with various members within that building. Could it be the secretary? Could it be the lunch person who providing that lunch? Or what about the janitor, right? A variety of individual within that school, and you just never know that relationship, the smile, the connection there make a huge difference. And when you do that with building that relationship, then you will build, remember, the relationship at home and at the community may be different than what is expecting at the school settings, just to realize that when you are explicitly defining the relationship, it will help you navigate and reduce conflict. So you have a clear boundary what the relationship look like, feel like, and sounds like. Then you have a clear boundary, and it's easier to work and resolve conflicts if it's occurred. When you do that, then community will build on it on. Again, on relationship is creating, developing, maintaining, and sustaining. Community will recreate it. So the community within the YIC of the youth within that classroom, or that within those youth relating to other youth within the building. The way I give it is like a individual fourth grade classroom, right? All those students make that connection and relationship. And then as you build relationships, think about all the communities within all of the 4 classroom on 4th grader, right? All those, and the teacher building that, just a 4th grade community. And if you have a bigger elementary school, then you think about how is the school culture as a community for 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, right? And then the community with the school within that larger community with the outside of the school setting. So that's the community we're talking about. So how those relationships help build that community. Remember that it's not just, okay, I'm at school and I'm part of this community. The student that enter in that classroom, student that enter that building has to feel like they are part of, that they feel connected, right? And what are you doing to create that connection? Will have a huge difference on how student go into school or go to the setting that you have. Just to re-emphasize, a community must have a sense of feeling connected, thinking about that the teacher wanted, a parent wanted to connect and be part of the classroom that they asking for and be involved with their student progress. And when you have that sense of community, when you have that sense of relationship, individual will held accountable for their action affected by individual relationship within that community. But how to keep student accountable for their behavior? This started with if a student feel connected with the communities. If it is not punitive, it is not punitive, right, on calling out the behavior, but it's to hold them accountable, calling out on their behavior, to work with that. And again, the emphasis on the video about teaching the student the skill through the process, building that skill for problem solve, to or solve those conflicts if it's occur, then it'll be better. It'll be much and see, it's better that way in terms of working and sharing the skills, so it won't occur again, rather than just punishment. And then the student will come back and say, okay, I did it wrong. How can I refocus on that or make correction on that if we don't teach them the skill. At this point, I just want to share just a little bit on the restorative approach is not to talk about punitive, but rather on restorative approach, right? We are changing the focus from punishing the wrongdoer to preparing the damage that caused by the misbehavior and to preventing it from occurring again. So in terms the school administrator, teacher, student, and parent can informally use restorative practice such as restorative dialogue with the student, or in a formal way such as restorative conferencing with a party of who created that conflict. And so that just reiterate, you saw early in the video, the last part of the video about conferencing, and I already mentioned about that, take a lot of time to work with that. So in terms of the first concept of restorative practice is building a healthy relationship, building that sense of communities, and then through that relationship and a sense of community, it's easier to keep youth accountable by calling out their behavior and then work asking them to address that behavior. At this point, I always want to clarify with you in terms of the restorative justice and restorative practice as used interchangeably, and there's a difference in that. Restorative practice is all about and I like to distinguish that is that restorative justice is a reactive, consisting of formal and informal response to the crime or the wrongdoing after it has occurred. So that's you have a reactive, right? Reacting to what's already occurring. Whereas the International Institute for Restorative Practice define restorative practices is a social science that study on how to build social capital and achieve social discipline to participatory learning and decision making. This is a proactive approach. It's emphasizing restorative practice is focused on building relationship, keeping youth accountable, and building that community. So basically what it's saying is that it's an everyday practice that you mind shift, like how can I build and keep and maintain this relationship with the youth and a sense of community. So when a behavior misbehavior occur, that you can call on the student and asking for this student to be accountable for their behavior. Questions on that, comments? At this point, if I will, I know we are limited time. I have until 10, right? Is that okay? 10 minutes. If you could take a few minutes, take a break out to a group of 4 or 5. If you can break out Amanda to the group and just what do you think, knowing that what I just defined and share with your relationship, what do healthy and appropriate relationship look like, sounds like, and feel like in your vision? So if you can break down to group and just have that conversation, and then we'll come back and have a few minutes to share out on that perspective. So the question is, what do healthy and appropriate relationship look like, feel like, and sounds like?
How long do you want to give them in the breakout rooms?
Probably 4 minutes. Is that okay?
All right, we'll give you guys 4 minutes, and it's just an auto assign how it does it. You'll get a second little pop-up to join your breakout rooms. Got a timer set, just so you know, and it's set for 3 minutes because when I close the breakout rooms, it automatically gives them a minute. So that'll be the 4. And for those just joining us, you should see a breakout room pop-up window or pop-up menu to join your breakout room.
Amanda, can folks see my presentation if I move forward one?
Not in the breakout rooms. Is there
Okay.
a question or anything you want me to share with them, or?
No, I'm just trying to note for the next part of my presentation. Yeah, I think we'll come back and share a few minutes just for people to share out.
Sure.
And then
we're okay. Actually, I think I misled you a little bit. I think you have until 5 after.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're good.
All right.
And I don't know if you've ever presented with Scott before, but he's really good to be flexible.
I know, he's awesome.
He is. I have to say that having folks from the office present was one of the nice ways to stay connected while we all weren't actually connected. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the rooms, which will give them that 1 minute warning. And some folks will probably automatically come back, but some might continue the conversation. So this will be their 1 minute. Okay, it looks like everybody's come back to us. And you are on mute, just so you know, Mr.
I'm looking for the unmute button.
Fair enough.
All right, well, welcome back. Folks, just shout out and just share your thoughts about the question, what do healthy and appropriate relationship look like, sounds like, and feel like to you or in your group discussion?
Sure. We talked about people feeling heard and getting mutual respect, being entitled to their feelings. And then, when you work through some of this stuff with reflective listening, that builds trust, which helps too.
Great.
I think our overall definition is that a healthy relationship is safe.
I'm going to add, we didn't talk about it, but boundaries, that healthy boundaries make healthy relationships, and that we understand what those boundaries are.
We talked about in our group about having a mutual respect, making sure that there's respect both ways and not just one way.
right? And so I think in terms of, great, thank you for sharing. I think when we talk about healthy relationship, right, it is important to emphasize that or be explicit to student what a healthy relationship or appropriate relationship look like, feel like. So you just mentioned, hit the nail right on the head. Is that how you say that? Right, it is setting the boundary, setting the expectation. Remember how being explicit and have a conversation, right? How a relationship, a healthy relationship at the family setting is different than that of at the school setting, right? So how you grown up to see the healthy relationship might be different that as a student grown up to be now, between us and an adult, how I was raised to where students are being raised now is different, right? The environment is different. So example is like I was raised in a culture that expect me as a youngster in the family, right? Or even in the classroom, respect authority. So always listen to the elderly, older siblings, listen to teachers, right? And to parent adult, and even within the family or outside, right? They tell me what to do and respecting them. When I talk back or share my thought, that is disrespectful. So it's a one-way road. This is why you don't do that as a kid. You understand is how I was being raised, right? If I say, I'm just have a conversation, I'm just share what my thought, and that is a disrespectful because I talk back. When I'm in America, I grew up in Vietnam and then come here when I was 12 years old. So the culture is different. When I come here, the culture here is different. That expectation of health relationship is that when teacher asks you talk back. If you don't talk back, if you don't talk to your teacher, you don't share your thought, then it's disrespectful, right? When you're being asked a question, you need to share your thought. Is a view that you are here is a view of participating and engage in the classroom. Whereas where I grown up, when you talk in class, it's disrespectful. The teacher will teach a concept, read a sentence or definition, you write it down and you don't talk until you're being asked or pointed to. So it's very different setting. So just be clear on the expectation, clear on the boundaries. Another example, and this is from colleagues of mine, and it's applying to us, right? When you're having a conversation with family, my tone might change on things that I am passionate about, or that it doesn't mean when I'm passionate about, my tone will go up. I'm very involved. Doesn't mean that I'm angry, mad, or aggressive. I'm just passionate about that. It is just the way it is. So you need to share how you feel happy, passionate in the relationship look like, that the receiving end of your family member might think differently than how you are, what you're expressing. So therefore, it's important to emphasize the common definition, an operational definition of what a healthy relationship look like, feel like, and sound like, both in your classroom and in your setting. And so be aware of how you are, the culture within the class at home versus the expectation and the relationship within the classroom or the setting that you're with. So just emphasize and be explicit about it so that I understand, that you understand. Just an example, and if you go to class and you don't share your opinions, sometimes like you're not involved. But in terms of how I was raised, and just recently I've been back to school, and so I just come up with to talk to the instructor, the professor, say, I'm just letting you know that I'm sitting in the corner of the classroom and that I don't often talk. It doesn't mean that I'm not participating or not paying attention to what you're teaching. It's just I learn better when I can see the whole picture of the classroom and how you react, and that I tend to not talk until I've been pointed to or asked to. It's just something in me, not that I'm not paying attention to your classroom. So have that direct conversation with my instructor, it helped. And so, okay, I understand now. So sometimes I just see you are kind of distant or not here. I say, it's just my way of learning. So have that conversation, share that expectation is very, very helpful in that regard. I mean, if we have more time, we go in that in-depth discussion and experience, not experience, but in-depth discussion and looking at different relationship and talking about setting that boundaries and expectations. So when you have that, you call out, you're not following the expectation. What reminds students of that expectation is easier to address when they're not following the expectation that you set. Just one more activities. So I ask all of you to think of a person that has the greatest impact in your life, okay? Think of this person and use one word to describe this person. So just shout it out. Think of a person that has the greatest impact in your life. It may be more, but think of just one person. There might be more than one person that has an impact in your life, right? And so shout it out. How, describe this person.
Encouraging.
Encouraging.
Strong.
Strong.
Present.
Selfless.
Loyal.
What is that? Sorry.
Loyal.
Loyal. Okay.
Helpful.
Helpful. Okay. So when this person challenges you, when you do something wrong or that you are not live up to your potential or expectation, how would you describe this person? How did this person treat you? So think of this person have the greatest impact on you, and now you do not meet your expectation, or you did something wrong. How would you describe this person?
Loving.
Supportive. Oh. Go ahead.
Still present.
Still present.
Supportive and encouraging.
I like what's in the chat, loving.
Loving. Kind is the word that I often hear. Loving, still there. Understanding, right? Keep me accountable, but did not lower my expectation, right? See me of who I am. Say how they feel about you, right? And I remember one of my professor, and not professor, but a supervisor. This is probably a decade and a half ago when I just completed my undergraduate, and this person called and we do our regular supervision, and say, what are you gonna do with your life? And say, well, I'm gonna get a job and marry and then have my own life. Say, no, this is what you need to do. Go on to, and then she see my potential. And then when there's something that this person does not always agree with me, caught out on some of the work that I do, conduct at the workplace, but I have the greatest respect for this person. And now, a decade and a half later, every time I still remember this person because this person see beyond me. Because at that moment I was saying, my English wasn't well, my sentencing structure wasn't complete and blah, 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 right? And so it's like graduate school and furthering my education, who's gonna pay my bill, right? But this person, no, this is what you need to do. And the next thing, this person helped connect me with the school and then move on to graduate school. So whenever I have a chance, I just praise this supervisor of me. And so I think as a mentor, as a teacher, as a school administrator, you have that ability to make an impact and you just never know. And this person may never know that I express this at many gatherings that I have, right? And so know that what you are doing make a difference by focusing on and building that healthy, strong relationship with the student that you're working with. With that, I'll just say today, which is scratches, we did a deep dive into the relationship community and accountabilities, and we just did activities that talk about healthy relationship, how it look like. And then I did an overview of restorative practice. There are many other parts that we haven't touched base, which is on the social distance window. We talk about how we often go to the discipline and punishment window and how can we work instead of work to or work for our youth, how can we work with our youth to build that strength? So that's part of the restorative practice. We do need to incorporate the fairness process, what it looked like. When we call out our student behavior, we are not shaming them, but we are encompassing and thinking of how we are integrating as time go on, right? You suspending them or you punish them, think about that student will eventually come back to you. So instead of stigmatizing them, you think about how am I going to integrate after addressing this behavior. The restorative practicum that we talk about, effective statement, restorative questioning, and restorative circle that we haven't gone to. But if there's time and the opportunities come back, I would happy to address that as the next time next opportunity we have a gathering. So again, just reemphasize that you are helping to plant a seed now. You may not see in a growth, but you are making a difference in their life. If you, and at your own entity, if you want to address and do further training, we have a way of, and Amanda can share that with you in terms of the link to get a full request and training to your entity. Just to share with you, this is my team. We talk as a prevent and student service team at USBE, and this is who we are, and I'm one of the team member there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kuhn. That was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your knowledge, and we will have you back. We'll get that scheduled for later in the school year. So I will let Scott take over.
Hey, before we get up and going, why don't we take like a 2-minute brain break? If you need to stretch, go fill your coffee, whatever. Turn your camera off if you're going to stretch. I have to maybe say that first, but 2 minutes, we'll get set up and then we'll get rolling, okay? Amanda, do you see my screen okay? Did it come up?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. I just have so many screens in front of me. I just want to make sure I didn't see your chat. I feel like I should have been better prepared with maybe some like music or something. I'll do that next time I'm the second presenter. So
okay, that sounds good. You know, this is even though we've done it a few times, I think we learn every time we do it, you know.
Yeah, for sure. 2 hours is a long time. I know it is for me.
Yeah.
And then I also have a space heater that's kind of running. Do you hear something going in the background?
No, I don't hear it.
Okay. All right. It's a cold morning, so I'm trying to.
I agree.
Make sure I stay warm.
I've got slippers on and a blanket on my lap, so I'm with you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to buzz right through this. So I'm going to jump in. I'm sure people are kind of showing back up. And so I'll get the presentation going here in just a second.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm here on mute if you need me.
Okay, great. All right, as we are welcoming people back, let's see if I can get this rolling. I just want to start out by mentioning that the presentation that I'll be giving today is a collective group of ideas that is coming from part 1 and part 2 of the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center project that they put together, funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, titled Creating Cultures of Staff Wellness and Care for Our School and Community Partners. I'm actually really excited about the conversation we had just previous. I love restorative practices. I love talking to Kuhn about it. We've had discussions in the past about how important it is with other connecting pieces of our work. And we're going to build on some of those relationship pieces. And I think we'll touch on that within this presentation. This particular presentation was put together by the folks in the Southeast region of the MHTTC, which comprises of 10 regional centers. Just some great stuff. If you're not familiar with them, I have their link here. And I think, are you sharing the slides, Amanda, after this? Do we share slides?
Yes, we do. I usually send out a PDF after the fact.
Perfect. And so you'll be able to access that. It'll be embedded into the slide deck. Wealth of open source information. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about culture, and specifically how culture can be created to support our well-being and our wellness. And we want to maybe start with talking about what culture is. When we say culture, what are we really referring to? And so looking at the Merriam-Webster dictionary as a starting point, culture is a set of beliefs or customs or values that a particular society or group has adopted. This is a way of thinking, behaving, working. And so we know that it is a part of an organization. Culture is a part of where we work. So if you think about it on those terms, you can ask yourself, what does it feel like to work where I work? Who I work with? The type of work I do in the profession. All of those things may make up culture, but it also might be a lot more than that. It might be the relationships between coworkers or the way that you feel about the work that you do. So this is, again, a way of life, a way of experiencing things that groups of people do. So as we dive right into it, I'm going to take a leap of faith and assume that you've already known that working with youth in community settings or in schools or wherever you work with them can be very stressful. Whether you've been on the job for a week or 25, 30 years, you know that this work can be a lot of work. Working with youth, on some days, we feel very successful. We feel like we're on top of the world. And on other days, we feel completely wiped out. And if you're like me, some days you feel like you've been run over by a bus full of those kids that we're helping, right? Or maybe it's bureaucracy or just all the things, right? It's just a lot. Stress can be magnified even more when there's a mismatch between the needs of vulnerable youth and children and the resources that we can access to support them. I think I feel that quite a bit. This stress can be even further magnified by things like, I don't know, a global pandemic, maybe. Social injustice, economic divides, all the things that are on our plates right now, very difficult. So why do we keep coming back to work? Why do we choose to do this? I think there's something unique about people that come in and work with youth, families, specifically youth, in some of the most difficult situations. I think we're driven by hope. We want to be there for the kids. We want to be there with this idea that we can make a difference, that we are making a difference. We want to be there on their happy days, and we're there on their not so happy days. Part of that question that Kuhn asked earlier about relationships, sometimes relationships are about sitting in the hard spaces with people for a little bit and helping navigate that and modeling for that youth, whether that's our own youth personally or whether it's youth we're working with, just what it means to go through hard times. With this knowledge that we can sometimes help them to grow and get stronger, be better, whatever that is, right? Better, higher functioning members of society, get better grades, higher functioning skills with their peers, whatever, however we want to label it. We just want to help them grow and get better and stronger. But we have to take our heads out of the sand about the impact that this has on us. We can't just keep going with this idea that it doesn't impact us. Sometimes that impact of stress looks like things like our short and long-term health. We know that our short and long-term health can have an impact. We know that the finances of schools and agencies can have an impact based on our personal stress, and even our own personal finances can have an impact, right? Also, those that we serve, that we're trying to serve, that we're here for, we know that their hearts and minds can be impacted by us carrying extra baggage into work. So what do we do about this? You know, we don't have a magic wand where we can automatically just increase the resources and reduce the need. We have to talk about this in a new way. And we are not alone in this work. We have to start talking about how to buffer the impacts of stress and using what we know. And that's what this presentation is really about, and what this information is about, is looking at both science and to our peers. And in fact, we'll be looking, and in part two, we'll be looking at science and some of the wisdom of our grandmothers to help us learn more effectively on how we can create these cultures of staff wellness and care, wherever you're at, school or community. So if we took a time machine back to our biology class, we would remember maybe that our teacher taught us about the two interconnecting systems of the body, one that mobilizes us when there's a threat, and one that helps bring us back down when the threat no longer exists and helps calm us down. Last time I presented to this group, we talked a little bit about these ideas. So hopefully they're not new to you. Might have to send you back to biology class if we need to. The first system kicks us into gear if there's a threat like a bear. If we're being chased, we get a ton of energy, we are mobilized, our adrenaline kicks in, oxygen flows through our body, and we're able to fight or flee the bear. But once there's no longer a threat, the second system helps us to calm down and suppress those adrenaline, those the extra energy that came through. And we return back to what we call a rest and digest stage. What's important is that when we're in this rest and digest stage, we notice other people in a different way. When we're not so amped up and stressed, we look across to the next person, we notice the smile, we feel better, we feel safer, more connected. And in turn, the other person also reciprocates and they feel safer and more connected too. So we're now connecting what's happening with our body and our reactions and how that also impacts others. One of the reasons evolutionary psychologists will say is that we are the most dominant species on the planet is because we are social creatures. We thrive on the connection with others. And again, those are those relationship pieces that we touched on earlier. But for a long time, we thought that this is how the nervous system responded. This autonomic system is what we refer to it as one part that mobilizes and one part that brings us back to calm. But now there's new thinking, and we're shifting our thoughts in a different way, maybe a more meaningful way. Instead of thinking of the autonomic nervous system as having just two parts, one mobilizing and one calming, it may be better if you visualize it as three different parts. And we have a visualization as three different ladders. The green would be safe and connected. Yellow would be mobilized. And when we talk about the blue ladder, we get a little bit gruesome, but we'll talk about it here for just a minute. When we have one bear, we feel like we can run away. But when we have two bears, what happens then? What happens when we feel trapped and helpless? If we perceive that there is no hope, that we can't do anything to make ourselves better, what happens then? If we feel trapped and helpless, there's a third system of our body that can kick in to help us survive. This is what we refer to as immobilized. So again, this is the new thinking. It's not just about connected and safe, and then sometimes we get amped up. There's times that we become frozen and stuck. This happens for us professionally sometimes. This happens in our professional settings, especially when we're talking about the stress that we're faced with in the professional workforce. So this is what one day, or sorry, this is the continuum of that ladders. If you think about the autonomic nervous system on a continuum, and this is what one day might look like in that continuum. You might start your day off and your house is messy, the dishes are still in the sink. I know that bugs me. It doesn't feel like things are getting done. And I might start in this place where I just feel defeated from the start, right? But going into work that day, I know at DeSama, we have a great receptionist. She smiles at me every time I come in and I am greeted by her. And I love just chatting with her for 5 minutes throughout my day. She has a bowl of candy, which I probably eat too much of. But I start feeling better. And that connection, I can think about, just going into work and feeling supported, maybe getting a positive email or response. And that's how maybe in this case, my day went. But by 2 o'clock, maybe there were some rumors that were circling. We started to have questions up in the air and uncertainty, and our supervisor was out. So in that moment, we might not be sure what's going on. We have this little bit of a problem arising and we become agitated. As our workday goes, if work just keeps piling up and we're not really addressing it in any way, by the end of the day, we might feel like we're overwhelmed. And I think more often than not, we get to that space frequently in the work that we do. I have to be constantly reminded by my supervisors that the work that we do will always be here. It'll always be there. And we have to be able to set those boundaries and say, okay, now it's my time, and honor that and walk away from it. It's easier said than done, especially when you work in the field that we do. But let's just say in this case, this scenario, that by 6 p.m. we were feeling better because our supervisor called us back, told us that everything's fine, actually thanked us for the work that we do to support youth and families. And at the end of the day, we felt better. We felt more connected, safer in our job, or whatever that is. So that's a typical day. Concerns arise when we get stuck, or when we begin to spend most of our day in a mobilized space. Particularly concerning is if this space is actually safe. So physically we are safe, but because our autonomic nervous system is not responding correctly, because we become conditioned to the stressful situations, we don't feel safe. Right? This is something that's pretty normal when somebody spends a lot of time in a high stress environment. They're constantly on guard. But this also has an impact on us and takes an effect when we're sitting too long in an immobilized state, when we're feeling hopeless or helpless, or that we can't make a difference in our jobs. So again, these two states are when we have to recognize that this is when we are starting to feel that impact and understand that it's having a negative, that stress is maybe having a negative impact. These are states that are supposed to be short-lived. Again, they're important to recognize why we have them, but they're not meant to be sat in for any length of time. When these protective systems perceive mild danger too often, it's similar to the idea of a bear circling our house, where we create a sense of stress that the body holds on to. Even in this perception, it's not in our conscious awareness. It's something that inside the home we are safe, but we can't let go of this underlying stress, even if our logical brain is telling us otherwise. The body, it nonetheless just kind of becomes habituated to this. And if you've been in this work for a number of decades, Maybe you're understanding what I'm saying. We carry this and we just think it's normal. I'm here to tell you that it has an impact. And again, like we said, we got to start talking about this. If you find yourself getting stuck, if you find yourself in the immobile space, please recognize how important it is to reach out to colleagues, to friends, family, but also to professionals. We need to practice what we preach. These are things that, you know, as a clinician, I will tell you that a lot of what we did in school was not just learn how to help other people, but it was to understand ourselves and know what, when I'm working with someone in a clinical setting, where my baggage is and what I have and where theirs are, and where that line is, so that I'm not bringing my issues into the clinical setting. So be thinking about this. So if consider reaching out. We are social mammals. This is important to us. We are meant to nurture one another, to support one another. And especially at these times, right? And when the whole world is suffering, it feels like a bit too much sometimes. This is what we talk about creating that safe space, that culture where we can do those things, where it's acceptable and encouraged to do those things. This is a great little exercise. This is something that you could do, or something that you could do with a client that kind of helps you understand yourself a little bit better. It's what it's called. When do I feel safe? When do I feel mobilized? And when do I feel immobilized? And we just fill this out. This is an example of what one might look like. And I think we can all relate to this, but when do I feel safe and connected? Well, in this case, it says spending time with colleagues, or having lunch and dinner with a friend, listening to music. These are all things that maybe we can understand as feeling safe, feeling good. When do I feel mobilized? And mobilized is good for me sometimes. I need a little fire underneath me to get me going. And so it's not all doom and gloom, but again, it should be short-lived. If I'm running late to a meeting, or if I'm being accused of a mistake, ooh, that's one. You know what's not good for me is when I got it wrong and someone told me I got it wrong. Hey, thanks, not helpful, you know. But in that moment, it doesn't necessarily help me. Feeling immobilized. Boy, this one is a big one for me. Watching the news. For the first time in my life, I think I've had to just consciously say, I'm not going to watch the news. I won't today, because I need that break. I need to be able to set that boundary. And I think there's a lot of people feeling that. Anyhow, great exercise. It doesn't stop there though. This is the next step for this. Once we understand, once we really get an idea of how we are maybe handling stress, this is where we can make a plan. And so this is you just saying what helps me get into a calm space, or what helps me move out of a mobilized space, or with myself or with others. Boy, I don't know if I can emphasize enough how important it is to be present for others, to be willing to have conversations and check-ins and such. The people that we work with end up being maybe the most important, meaningful part of our job and our work at the end of the day. You know, a 20-year career, a 30-year career, and I'm going to throw you under the bus, Ignacio, or I will refer to you as Nacho, as I know you, who I worked alongside for years, maybe a couple years down in Springville. I will tell you that the people that you work with are important, and you go through hard times. You work with these hard cases together, and we need to learn how to lean on each other. And yeah, I appreciate you, Ignacio. Nacho. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I shouldn't apologize, right? All right, part two. Let's talk part two. Let's learn some more. More than we live in our city, more than we live in our town, or in our houses, or more than we live in our cars. We live in our body. We share a common experience of being human. Some days we feel like being human is all we can do. But I think on most days, we strive to live lives that are healthy, full of vitality, and we engage in a meaningful way. At least we would hope so. It's important to note that it's not just for our own benefit that we hope to do this, but it's so that we can be fully engaged with children, families, but also with our colleagues and the communities we care about. Life doesn't just happen in a vacuum. We are surrounded by things happening, both good and bad. In some moments, life is indeed wonderful and fulfilling. We have friends that believe in us. We have, for me, nature is a big one. So if you haven't been out, get out. Leaves are changing and you might have missed it already because now it's snow. Seeing the light bulb come on in a child that you're working with, man, that's awesome. They're making and connecting those dots. Having colleagues who offer encouraging support, living lives of purpose, but very least at the end of the day, we have a warm dinner and a comfortable bed to come home to. Something that not everybody has. But life is not just butterflies and ice cream. Life takes its toll, especially when we're feeling surrounded by things like students who are neglected, chronic behavior issues that we are having a tough time managing, workloads that are unmanageable, right? I can guarantee you that, I don't know what, there's 20, 30 people on the call. Some of us are trying to micromanage or not micromanage, but what is that called? When we do two things at once. Sorry, it's slipping my memory. Multitask. There you go. Multitask. There. Thank you. I guarantee if you're a state worker, you are doing two things at once. And I've got two screens and two phones, and we know exactly what this is like. I get it. Too few of resources. We talked about the resources. Unsupportive managers. We run into those from time to time. Workplaces where we feel ineffective. All of these can be additional stressors that can come in, and we can experience these demands in a way where we become, I will say, imbalanced. This can and will damage our physical and mental health in the short and long term. We know more and more about the mind-body connection today than we ever have. I think I've plugged this book before. There's a number of them out there, but The Body Keeps Score is one. I won't go down the laundry list, but there's so much information that today we understand how chronic stress influences our body and how it impacts ourselves. And the importance to be having this conversation about how to care for ourselves and care for others. It's important to remember that even when we find ourselves struggling to navigate these responsibilities, that we are not alone. Among those that we have the availability to help support us are the scientists, are the researchers that are looking at exactly how the body and how we can buffer stress and balance our health for now and into the future. We're going to talk about a little bit about these buffers, and we're just going to go over them briefly. There are 7 that are currently most recommended by scientists. And I'm going to say scientists, but I'm also going to say our grandmothers would have rolled their eyes at this because they already knew it all along. These are things that our grandmothers were telling us. And so some of these I think are going to be intuitive, but at the same time, you might learn something new about them. And it's not something that all 7, we need to do it all at once. I know as state workers, we sometimes want to be overachievers and do it all, but I want you to kind of pay attention to what comes up for you, especially in light of the fact that we are all in different chapters in our lives. And each chapter might give us different place or enough or room in our life, I should say, to do these things. If you're like me, I have young children in the home still. I'll talk about quality sleep. It's a dream that I have. One day I can maybe get to, but at least right now, it's not happening. So I invite you to take what's useful, disregard the rest. and we'll dive right into it. Okay. Also, I should just mention, we're going to be talking about some of these concepts that are going to be individual concepts for you, but also how they apply to the culture of staff and well-being and care. If you're already one of these people that are doing a great job, great, keep it up, and tell others, share with others, just what your experiences are with the way that we can help others out. We can learn from others. So much we can learn just from talking with others. The 7 buffers are these on your screen, most recommended by scientists and of course our grandmothers. Things like quality sleep, supportive relationships, mindfulness, mental health, access to nature, physical movement, and nutrition. And we'll dive into each one quickly. So over 1,000 scientific articles and studies have concluded that 7 to 7.5 hours is kind of the window that we're looking for, where most humans function optimally. Once an adult hits less than 6 hours of sleep, there's a number of different disorders that can become more prevalent. So you can be at higher risk for things. Why? Well, scientists are still trying to figure out a lot of the why. The brain structure changes while we are sleeping. We know this. Sometimes we feel like this is a repairing. I think I heard somebody say, this is where we process the trauma and the drama of the day. We don't really fully know why we sleep, but we know that it's important. 7 to 7.5 hours is both optimal for the short term and the long term. If we don't get this, impaired reasoning, problem solving goes down, learning and attention to detail, we know this. We get that brain fog. We have a reduction in emotional regulation. We can be more irritable. We know that. Increased negative bias. You've got to remember this. We judge people more harshly when we're not doing well. In your position, what might that look like when you're reading a case or working with families? We have an increased blood pressure, increased risk of diabetes. We need to take sleep seriously and take care of ourselves in that way whenever we can. Sleep, I've embedded a sleep hygiene resource. This is something that talks about routine, about exercise, breathing, meditation before bedtime, talks about caffeine consumption. Again, if sleep is something that you're having a hard time with, try changing some things up. Try talking to your doctor about it if it's something that's really impacting your life. It will make a difference and can make a difference. And I've heard some clinicians say that this is 30% of the wellness with their clients. They check in with how they're sleeping, because sleep, yes, it's good for our body, but it could also be an indication of other disruptors that are happening in our lives. So pay attention to your sleep. Okay, let's look at supportive relationships. And again, building upon what Kuhn presented on restorative practices. Today, we know better than ever the value of supportive relationships as essential for children, for their healthy development into functioning adults. But now scientists are starting to measure the impact of relationships that adults have as well. So this was interesting to me. Research indicates that the lack of social support is linked to more negative impacts on mortality than not exercising. So think about that. Lack of social supports more impactful than exercise on our mortality. In fact, the lack of social supports has relatively the same negative impact on smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, crazy. Or just living in Utah County when it's really bad air quality. We've had it rough this year. Anyways, so we also have to remember that research indicates that people with supportive relationships have a better brain functioning longer into life. So there's both a positive gain from these and a negative if they're not there. So to live longer, one thing that people are looking at, and I think it's in the book, The Blue Zones, is how those social connections keep us active and keep us moving and have better impacts on us than even our physical health. We are happier longer. We are being social connected is the best predictor of happiness. It's true for our students and it's true for us as adults. Interesting. When we do this, again, it's not just you who benefits, it's everyone who benefits. Have someone that we can rely on really does calm our nervous system. It helps us stay more relaxed, it helps us stay healthier longer, and it can actually reduce both emotional and physical pain. Okay, I'm going to speed through into the next place. Oh, no, sorry. I do want to talk about why this is relevant in the workplace. We just read this slide. Put simply, when employees are experiencing positive relationships, especially positive relationships at work, the body's ability to build, maintain, and repair itself is improved, both in the workplace and in non-workplace settings in our leisure time and resting times. This does improve our culture when we get this one right. Okay. Here are some tips for nurturing those workplace relationships. I already mentioned the smile. Man, you've got to know the value of that. Use it frequently. Expressing gratitude. I love that. In fact, I work with the Safe and Healthy Schools team, and we start our meeting by expressing one thing that we're grateful for. And it's a fun practice, and it's a part of our culture. I love the mindfulness to start this. That's a culture piece, right? It's we start with our meeting in this way, or this is how we conduct ourselves. More tips here. We're not going to go through all of them in detail, but number 6, I'll just have to say, this works for colleagues, but it works for the students. Sometimes you might feel like you have to be a talent scout to find the positives with our students. I won't say with our colleagues, but you've got to recognize people, pat them on the backs, tell them thank you any chance you can, and as often as you can with your students as well. Okay, where am I at? Okay, have you ever had a thought pop up in your head? We're going to go jump into mindfulness. I think I said that slide. Yes, mindfulness. Have you ever had a thought pop up into your head that you can't get out? It keeps distracting your attention and taking your attention, or suddenly someone in your day, or you hear a song, they say something or see, and you're just, now it's embedded in your mind. You'll never be able to get it out from here on out, right? Depending on that thought, it might actually be accompanied by a disruption, emotions, or other things that may be difficult, especially if it's a reminder of something that is negative. This is how our brains work. Mindfulness is the practice of really acknowledging those things, but not engaging with those things. It's similar to traffic. You can watch traffic, but I don't encourage that you go out and jump in traffic. Don't play Frogger with the cars. It may feel as if our inner attention is being ruled by a pesky monkey swinging back and forth on the branches and our neural networks, making it difficult for us to stay focused. When thoughts become intrusive, it's time for us to shift gears. And let's look at this, maybe less of a mindfulness, and let's look at this through religion. And I know I've been given very clear guidelines on what I can say with religion. So the slide is this. World religions. Now, despite whether you consider yourself religious or not, you can look back on history and understand that every major religion recognizes how the spiritual leaders have encouraged their people to use calm and focus in practices such as scripture, repetition of holy names, or other forms of prayer, right? You can see on your screen, these are some of the examples that different religions have done. And also consider your own personal religious practices and beliefs and how they connect mindfulness principles and practices within the religion. Mindfulness at its core whether it's secular or religious based, is the ability to focus our mind on what is important to us. Unintended consequences of focusing the mind in a calming way. You can see that our bodies actually respond to this. We have lower blood pressure. We have better sleep. We reduce our stress. We alleviate digestive issues, reduce chronic pain, set up the body for overall health, and doing nothing or the opposite is also true. I'm working hard to be done on time, or I dig a little bit more into this, but it is important. And I want to skip to tips for mindfulness in the workplace. Focus on slowing or concentrating on one thing at a time. Sometimes it's hard, especially when all the things are there, right? You'll be better at one thing than you will be at two. Attention is not infinite. Attention is something that if you divide it, it's 50 there and 50 there. It's not 100 in that and 100 in that. Just remember, taking a moment to feel gratitude. I talked a little bit about that. Organize with your colleagues, select a mindfulness app and do it for 2 to 4 weeks. This is a fun one. These are these little challenges. We do these with weight loss all the time. We do this with exercise all the time. Try it with mindfulness. You'll be surprised. Okay, mental health. Let's take a peek at it. To illustrate this, we're going to look at a baby real quick. Infants are cute. They're cuddly. Sometimes they accidentally reach up and smack themselves in the face, right? And they say, "Hey, what happened?" Sure enough, they come back to calm, everything is back to normal, and then bam, they smack themselves in the face again. This is something that we can look at with kids and say, well, as adults, we're way too smart and sophisticated to smack ourselves in the face and cause ourselves any suffering, right? This is just for kids. Or are we? When reviewing literature on wellness and self-care in the workplace, one word pops up repeatedly as an effective strategy to help us buffer stress from harmful outcomes. That is self-compassion. So we can exercise self-compassion. Oftentimes, the things that are coming at us sometimes are even a result of our own doing or our own perceptions. And changing our mindset and changing the way we look at it and changing our understanding can oftentimes improve the situation. Teaching employees in a stressful workplace self-compassion strategies can result in not just increased well-being, but decreases in both secondary trauma, stress, and burnout. This is what we're talking about, especially when we are dealing with these high stress situations where the clients are dealing with high levels of trauma, and we are in turn, having a secondary trauma or vicarious trauma reactions and leads to burnout. Self-compassion can help to buffer this. If this is you, what do I mean by self-compassion? Well, let's talk about it really quickly. I'm going to give you the 3 pillars of self-compassion. The first is mindfulness. That it's a self-talk. It's a really mainly mostly about just recognizing that this is a moment of suffering. Telling yourself that in this suffering, in the moment that I'm feeling this, I'm acknowledging it. That in and of itself can really help to damper what's happening in this moment. The second piece, suffering is a part of life. You understand that it's not just me. I'm not doing this alone. I'm connecting it to others. And in that, I normalize suffering. So 1, I acknowledge I'm suffering. 2, I acknowledge that it's a part of life. It's what it means to be human and this human experience, this planet. And then 3, in that moment, I can be kind to myself. I can cut myself some slack. I can know that I'm doing the best that I'm doing and it's okay. Just this exercise alone of self-compassion can be extremely beneficial when we're placing these heavy burdens on ourselves, or when they're being placed upon us, either one. Self-compassion is the opposite of these. I have to say opposite because if you read them, maybe it's what your inner dialogue is saying sometimes. I don't know what yours are saying. I know what mine is saying, and sometimes it's not very kind. Self-compassion is the opposite. We'll skip this slide. It's just it's basically saying self-kindness is the opposite of self-judgment, diving into the difference between the two. But tips for self-compassion with colleagues. You know, if we can extend it to ourselves, we should extend it to others, being willing to listen, especially without solutions. Be an example of being, if you're in a leadership role, compassionate leader, I will tell you, can make the world of difference in your workplace. Some great tips. Anyhow, I love access to nature. I'm not going to go on a rant. I already told you that you need to get out. You need to see these trees, these mountains. They're beautiful. But it's where I recharge. Not just me, though. A growing number of hospitals are adding nature spaces to their campuses because the research indicates that patients who can see a tree from the hospital, or even say that indoor plants can do the same thing, they experience significant less or need significantly less pain medications, experience fewer post-surgical complications, they discharge earlier, lower blood pressure, less anxiety, less fatigue, lower pain. We know that nature plays a part. Just viewing for 3 minutes can have positive benefits. We know this is when our grandmothers just said, it's time for you to get outside and play. And truth is, we are getting close to the end of our time. And I think that we do need to all maybe collectively get outside and play. So I will be wrapping up here quickly, but let me just quickly go to, and there's two that we'll skip for time today, with nutrition and with physical movement. I think we both understand that quite well. Those are, by the way, this is a picture of us, if you can see on your screen, 1,000 years ago when we were roaming the plains. It's important for us to get up and move. And I'm going to model that and encourage that as we end early. But according to scientists, I will tell you this. Taking care of yourself is important. We have to take care of ourselves, guys. It's no longer optional anymore. We can no longer, we can no longer say that this is something that that is secondary. We have to put this forward as a very meaningful thing. And I challenge each one of you as individuals to say this. Is my self-care something that is building myself so that I can help others? Or is my self-care going too far and am I taking from others to give to myself? That is a very fine line. It's a conversation that we're having quite frequently. Self-care isn't about taking more so I can be better at the expense of others. Self-care is taking more of what I need, knowing myself so that I can in turn serve others. And whether those others are the colleagues that you're serving, whether the clients, or whether it's just your own family, you'll benefit from being the best version of you can be. Now, I mentioned that this is a condensed version, quick version of parts 1 and 2 of this amazing resource. Part 3, if you are a leader, if you have any kind of administrative duties, if you're wondering how can we incorporate self-care and these things more into our culture as a workplace, part 3 is for you. And I really encourage you to go back and dig into that. Again, the slide deck will be made available, the full link for the training. We don't have any time for questions or anything, so I don't want them anyways. But if you do have something, please feel free to email me. My resources and references are all there. And Amanda, I will hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Scott. We actually do have a couple minutes. So if there are some questions, I've got Scott on the hook for 4 more minutes here if anybody does have some questions. But thank you. This was very timely. I needed this reminder myself. Yesterday, I worked through my lunch and then was ruminating and came home and sat right down and started working again. So I did not respect my own boundaries. So thank you for the reminder that I need to take care of myself. So anybody have any questions? We do have a couple private chats that came to me that said, "You're amazing, Scott." And thank you for the information, Kuhn. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go ahead and end a few minutes early, which I know makes all of us happy, or at least people like me who want to go home early. So thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate the participation and the information. And like Scott said, we'll make his PowerPoint available on my follow-up email. Kuhn's is licensed, so I don't believe his will be available, but you're welcome to reach out to either one of them if you have questions. Of course, connect with me. In the signature block of all of my emails is that link to request training. So if you're an administrator looking for the third step from Scott, or a team who wants to have Kuhn come in and do the full restorative justices training, go ahead and submit that request. And thank you so much for joining us today.